Of The Angry Astronaut. I am relying on my Patreon folks, my Discord folks for feedback. This is not something that's going to have any live chat. Everybody, of course, is welcome to watch. But this is kind of the old-fashioned way that I used to do live streams. Where my Patreon and Discord supporters tended to be the ones involved in the discussion, and everybody else, of course, would be more of an audience for the discussion. Is kind of how we used to do almost every live stream until recently. So I just want to see, first of all, can I be heard? If folks would be so kind as to post into live stream Q&A. As to loud and clear. Good. Thank you very much, Darth. I do appreciate that. So yeah, I actually did a little bit of soul searching today as to whether or not I was actually going to do a live stream, because with my son at the moment, hadn't seen him in a long time because I was stranded down in the Gulf Coast for a very long time and all that. So I decided to not work on a video. I do have a lot of research done for a video that I'll be releasing tomorrow once SN11 flies. That's assuming that SN11 does fly, which is kind of an open question. We have over 100 people tuning in. Thank you so much, folks, for tuning in. But we'll see whether, like I say, we'll see what happens with SN11. If it flies, lands successfully, doesn't land successfully, whatever, my video will come out immediately after that. And for Patreon folks, actually, for the Discord folks, there will probably be an early release of that video. But enough of that. I've been getting a lot of questions on the chat, no matter what topic I've been talking about, where Oumuamua, the subject of that, is brought up. And so, I decided, since I end up talking about this a fair amount, let's go ahead and discuss the Fermi paradox. Almost all of us, oh, by the way, shout out to the new patrons. Starliner Glitch wanted to make sure, just in case, and make sure that you're in live stream Q&A, by the way. That's the server name. And if you want to be part of this, it's pretty easy. It's in the description. You just sign up for Patreon for as little as $3 a month, and then you activate your Discord benefits, and the directions are right there. It just takes a few minutes. So that's up to you as to whether or not you want to be part of that and support the channel. I do appreciate it either way, because that's going directly into my observing SN15. That's what that fund is going towards. Since this last trip didn't turn out to be everything I wanted it to be. I just wanted it to be, watch the green run and go back. But instead, it turned out to be a lot more than that. A lot of exciting things, but at the same time, a lot of expenses too. And so as a result, I'm kind of, running some of these things to try to go back to CSN 15, which, I anticipate I'll be able to do one way or the other. But anyway, okay, all of that having been discussed, I also appreciate that the Drake equation graphic for a Fermi paradox discussion. Yeah, for those of you who are not familiar with the Drake equation, it's something that I first learned about when I was watching Carl Sagan when I was just a young little nerd back in the early 1980s, and Carl Sagan goes through this lengthy equation as to what the odds are of an intelligent civilization existing in our galaxy. And he starts off with 100 billion stars, and then goes on to how many of those stars actually have planets, how many of those solar systems in turn have planets in a habitable zone where you can have liquid water, all of the necessities. And then in those days, we didn't know a lot of this stuff. We knew how many stars roughly were in the Milky Way galaxy, but that's about it. We didn't know a damn thing about anything else. We didn't even know that there was water on Mars at this time. A lot of people thought that Mars was as dry as a bone. And actually, the opposite is true. There is a lot of water on Mars. There's water on the moon, and we had no idea in those days. So really, a lot of the fundamental building blocks for life is present within our own solar system in places that we didn't think that it existed, including the moon. I mean, not liquid water, obviously, but there's water there where we didn't think that existed. So out of all of those planets, they're in the so-called Goldilocks zone, that sort of thing. How many of those would, have life develop? And then going from single cell life to multicellular life, which is kind of a difficult jump from an evolutionary standpoint, to go from single cell to multicellular, and then for that to in turn evolve into something intelligent. The whole thing gets more and more narrow as time goes on. So in any event, I'm frozen. Okay, am I still frozen? Am I still frozen? If somebody wants to make a quick note. Not frozen. Okay, good. All of a sudden, I was seeing that popping up. I was like, my God, how could that be possible? I've got a really good internet connection here. Okay, I'm glad I'm not frozen anymore. Awesome. So, to review, how many, out of all of the stars, out of all the planets in habitable zones, out of all the places where life can evolve, where does it evolve into the multicellular stage and then take that leap to intelligent thought? I think, therefore I am. How many of those exist? And then that last great filter that Mr. Sagan would talk about was the filter where the civilization destroys itself. How often does that occur? With us, we could have a nuclear war tomorrow. And if it was a full-fledged, full-blown nuclear exchange between just ourselves and the Russians, assuming the Chinese didn't get involved in the whole fun, it would be thousands of nuclear warheads raining down on the planet, which would annihilate the main targets, obviously. And then on top of that, it would create a nuclear winter that would probably last as long as 10 years. So 10 years without sunlight, and that could very well extinguish our species, or at least bring us to the very brink of extinction. Something like this could happen quite easily, especially given the level of tensions that currently exist between the United States and Putin and the Chinese, and all of that. It's at a higher level of tension now than it's been since the Cold War. And that's just one thing that could end us. So out of how many, intelligent civilizations, how many of them don't make it past that filter? How many of them end up destroying themselves with their own technology? If that number is Professor Dr. Sagan, yes, I guess I'd tend to put it that way just because people used to call him Mr. Sagan a lot during talk show interviews back in the day. Of course, I think that was on Saturday Night Live, if I remember. He was a huge personality. For those of you who are young and just know his name, but not really his reputation, he was all over the place on TV. He was everywhere, and he expressed his opinions not just about matters in terms of astronomy or in terms of astrophysics or life elsewhere or anything like that. He talked about, SDI. He had very strong opinions about not proceeding with SDI and ballistic missile defense. He wrote a very long and compelling article about that, actually, and how SDI would just encourage the Soviets to build a larger nuclear arsenal to swamp it. That is, of course, what led to the Soviets destroying themselves economically, because they did build an arsenal big enough to do that. So, that was the long-term objective, it seems, was to bring the Soviet Union down. But at the time, he was very, very outspoken about his opinions in that regard. So, in any event, Professor Sagan, in his memory, sure, I'll transition to that. This was the final equation, or the most important aspect of this equation, the Drake equation, was what happens, with that final filter. is only, do only a very tiny percentage of civilizations pass that point in the filter, and then wipe themselves out. Maybe not with a nuclear war, maybe with advanced artificial intelligence, and that intelligence in turn wipes them out. But if that's the case, then the galaxy should be crawling with machine civilizations or something like that. So, it's kind of tough. It's a difficult calculation. So, of course, he said if that number is extremely low, if only one in, say, a million civilizations actually survive longer than that, then we could be very well alone in the galaxy, and that would explain why we haven't seen any evidence of intelligent life, is because intelligent life has a tendency to snuff itself out. The other side of it is of the equation. What he believed, to quote from him exactly, if I remember correctly, is he believed that the galaxy is brimming over with life, and we just have yet to see it. So, with all of that having been said, okay, so we've got some comments here. Twickers Bernie, hello. I think you may be new on the live stream. When I was at uni in the 70s, we had a guest lecturer from Queen's Belfast. Can't remember his name. He went through a long calculation and came up with a figure for the likely number of civilizations in the galaxy: 10 million. Yeah, and that is something that Carl Sagan talked about. In his opinion, millions of civilizations existed in the galaxy, not just this tiny number. Of course, we also have to look at the overall age of the galaxy. Out of all the civilizations that have existed, how many are existing now, as opposed to existed for a while, went extinct, took themselves out, experienced some sort of cataclysm that destroyed their civilization, that sort of thing. Some of them may be extinct, but they may have left the remnants of their presence somewhere in the galaxy, perhaps even in our own solar system. Because let's face it, we really haven't made a very concerted effort to find any evidence of any other civilization in our solar system. I mean, people can talk about the face on Mars and the pyramids on Mars and stuff till they're blue in the face, whatever. But, I've seen, and believe me, I used to actually think that those were kind of convincing back in the days of the Viking images. But since much more thorough images have been processed, to me, it kind of looks, like it could be, could be artificial, given the perspective, or given, just how unified the shapes look and that sort of thing. But at the same time, I tend to think not. I tend to think that they are natural phenomena, natural formations that are similar to some natural formations here on our planet. But we haven't been looking that hard. And that is the main thing, is that the general consensus, or the conclusion, is amongst the scientific community, is that there's nothing to look for. That every time we think we see something, we dismiss it. And so, not to say that we've actually seen anything, but once again, we're not actually looking. Nobody, in their right mind, who's at NASA or any place else, is going to say, you know what, while we're at it with perseverance, we should be looking in great detail to see if we can find any evidence of any remnants of another civilization. Nobody in their right mind is saying that. Why? What evidence do we have that no civilization in the entire history of our solar system ever paid a visit to Mars? And given the fact that Mars tends to not wipe out the evidence of previous visitors in the same way that our planet does, and certainly the moon, things don't change on the moon at all. Why do we not look, just in case? I mean, for the fun of it. Why not? And we're really not making any active effort to look, aside from the people who look at these photographs and think they see things. And then they post that, everybody thinks they're nuts. And for the most part, I don't find a lot of credibility in what they think they see anyway, but there could be. there could be something sitting there at some point that we just pass over and refuse to acknowledge. We're not looking. So maybe that's just it. Maybe they are here and we're just not looking hard enough. Yeah, maybe they pollute their home planet so much that they destroy themselves. That's another thing. They poison their own environment to such a degree that it makes the planet no longer habitable. If we had continued, our own civilization had continued with the wholesale pollution of our planet the way we were doing in the 60s and the 70s and had not really let up, our planet would be in far worse shape today than it actually is. All right, so Darth says, in addition to not looking hard, we've also only been able to look for other civilizations for about 100 years. Very true, which is a trivial length of time compared to the scale of the galaxy. There's no telling how many opportunities passed without notice. Yeah, I do tend to agree. And once again, I keep going back to Oumuamua. If that indeed was the product of an intelligent civilization, and I believe that there's very strong evidence. I'm with Dr. Loeb on it. What can I say? I think that there are strong indications that it was. If indeed we did see something from another civilization just within this short span of time that we have had the knowledge and the instruments to be able to look for something like that, and also to look at it from a comparative standpoint and say, okay, it's not this, it's not this, it's not this. We've only been able to do that for a short amount of time. The Spitzer Space Telescope, for example, has only been up in this millennia and is no longer functional. So, we've really only had the ability to qualitatively look for these sorts of things for a very short amount of time. If indeed Oumuamua was artificial, that would indicate that our galaxy is indeed brimming over with life. Because if just by pure coincidence, during the time that we've been able to look for these things, something came flying through our solar system that we observed, how many things like it must have flown through our solar system in the thousands of years that we've been unable to look for it? And so therefore, how many of these kinds of objects probably, may exist in our galaxy? And, clearly interstellar objects do encounter our solar system because we found a comet shortly thereafter, which was of interstellar origin. That makes sense. Natural object coming from the outer reaches of another solar system where a star could have passed through, dragging comets with it, that sort of thing. That all makes sense. Seeing other comets from, interstellar destinations, but something else, something that like Oumuamua, a lot less likely, especially if it was artificial. And if indeed it was, and I think we should try to chase it down personally. I think that we should be making an effort to do that. If we discover that that is indeed the case, then that is a strong indication that our galaxy is brimming over with life, is brimming over with civilizations, and the answer to the Fermi paradox has been answered at that point decisively. Okay, scientists like Michio Kaku and Avi Loeb and Jill Tarter say that we will find ETI in a few decades. Yeah, a lot of people believe that. I hope we do. I really hope that we answer this from now, very soon. I certainly hope that this question gets answered decisively. The problem is, as our instruments get better, as these better telescopes get deployed and that sort of thing, and we start to see more compelling evidence of intelligence outside of our solar system, when are we actually going to accept it as conclusive evidence? When is the scientific community actually going to say, okay, that's definitely the product of an artificial, something artificial. It has no natural explanation, not something that, we don't know what the natural explanation is, but there probably is a natural explanation. We just haven't thought of it yet. That seems to be the go-to explanation for anything we can't explain these days. Well, we're not sure what the natural explanation is, but there must be one. That's probably the answer. It's never aliens. That's always the answer. Remnants for extinct species could still be traveling here in the form of radio signals. Yeah, that is true. There's a lot of ways that civilizations could transmit their consciousness, and that's been theorized in the past. Machine species or machine civilizations, species that make themselves into something on a hard drive or something and travel in that form. Perhaps that is ultimately our destiny. Perhaps what Elon Musk is working on right now is what's going to happen. Do I think that Oumuamua is a derelict probe from another civilization, like another civilization stumbled across one of our Voyager probes, says Starliner Glitch? What I believe is what the first scenario that Avi Loeb, Dr. Loeb, put forward, and that is that it was a marker buoy. Its speed before it encountered our sun was at a speed which is called the local standard of rest for our region of the galaxy. If you're taking into account all of the things that we observed about Oumuamua, its speed currently, and then you take the sun's gravity into effect and all of the, and plus the deviation that it made, take all that into account. Oumuamua was traveling at the local standard of rest, or LSR, for the galaxy. That is a huge coincidence. Only a 0.2% chance that it was traveling at that speed, in which case it was at a speed that kept it kind of stationary relative to the other stars around it. To me, that seems like a navigational marker buoy of some kind. It may have been putting out a signal that we couldn't detect, or perhaps its rotation 8 times a minute, not changing no matter what. No matter what happened to this thing, it kept rotating at the same speed. If you had better observational equipment, thousands of years in advance to what we have, something like that would prove to be an extremely useful navigational tool, even more useful actually than a pulsar, because pulsars, their speed of rotation changes over millions of years. In theory, something like a Oumuamua could keep tumbling at the same rate for 1 billion years, because not much encounters things in interstellar space. Very, very few things run into something like that. So it could be an active marker buoy, or another theory is that it's a derelict. It's just a piece of space trash. We've got lots of trash out in our own oceans, pieces of plastic, etc., that accumulate into these massive super collections of plastic, one of which is in the Pacific Ocean, a terrible, horrible pollutant to our oceans. Perhaps, there's a similar thing for the galaxy. So we shall see. We shall see with that. Directed panspermia, says Neil. Yeah, that's another common belief or theory, is that, we have seeding the galaxy, seeding this area of the galaxy with similar types of biological material so that it can evolve into similar types of things. Maybe not even intentional. It may simply be part of the natural process for the evolution of life, that everything comes from out there. I mean, given how loaded comets are with water, with organic materials, that sort of thing, it may just simply be part of the natural process for the seeding of organic material to come to that. Yes, the JWST, that telescope is going to be a game changer. Yeah, it will. Once that goes out, the James Webb, once it goes out there, it's going to be able to see a lot of things that we can't currently see. That's going to be an exciting time indeed. We've got well over 360 people watching. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like, please subscribe if you're not already subscribed. let's keep this channel going as best we can. Although obviously I intend to keep the content coming for as long as I possibly can, whenever I can get it fitted in. Ken Walton says, I've often wondered if other civilizations have pulled back from destroying their planet's ecosystem and are living within their planetary means without technology that we can detect. That's an interesting theory, Ken. Sure, a lot of civilizations may have come to the conclusion that, we keep this up and we're going to take ourselves out, that we cannot survive and we cannot sustain life for millions of years if we keep our civilization going like this. However, the conclusion that they could come to is that we go out into space, we start living in space, creating, Dyson spheres or Dyson swarms, those sorts of things. There's a lot of ways to sustain a super advanced civilization without, without having to restrict yourself. But at the same time, it's not easy to do that. Deploying a Dyson swarm would be a massive undertaking of engineering. So yeah, it could be. It could be that the ones that survive are the ones that scale themselves back, and that's why we can't see them, because they're not really that active. Do I think humans should be launching satellites to other solar systems en masse? Should we be advertising our existence to the galaxy? Says Joey Jojo. Boy, that's a big question, isn't it? Should we, the Breakthrough Starshot initiative, of course, is one of the most famous, well, probably the most famous current initiative to try to get us to Proxima Centauri, to get a good close look at it. The idea of sending out light sails propelled by very powerful lasers to a speed of about 10 to 20% of the speed of light, and therefore getting to Proxima Centauri within a human lifetime, well within a human lifetime actually, and then getting a quick look at it as you go blowing past Proxima b, that one planet that we're interested in orbiting that red dwarf. Or perhaps we go to Alpha Centauri instead. There's a planet within the habitable zone there as well, and Alpha Centauri is actually more similar to our sun than Proxima is, which is a red dwarf. So hard to say. Should we be advertising the fact, though? That's a big question, isn't it? Is there anything out there that's dangerous? Now, we haven't seen conclusive evidence of that, but we have seen a couple of things that suggest that there could be things out there that are dangerous. For example, there is, and you can look this up, there's a solar system, a developing solar system, I put this in one of my videos, that had, all of the matter that we would expect to see in an evolving solar system. And then over the course of just a couple of decades, all of that matter disappeared, vanished. And we have no explanation. There was no black hole, no anything else that could have taken all of that material away. We're talking about an entire solar system's worth of matter just disappeared. And there is no natural explanation that we've come up with. And generally, what astronomers and astrophysicists have said is, well, nothing to see here, and let's go back to our old preconceptions rather than talking about it. What took all that matter and why? What would be its motivation for doing that? Or was it something natural? But if it was something artificial, what would it need with all of that? And might it do the same if it came to our solar system and gobbled up all the planets here for some purpose? And if we advertise our presence here, who knows? It could attract the attention of something we don't want to come here. So yeah, it's a tough question. I have mixed feelings. Let me tell you about that. Would the government tell us if we find something? I think not, says Airborne Rob. Yeah, it would kind of shock people. There's a lot of differing opinions on that. I mean, the public has gotten more and more, comfortable with the notion of us finding aliens. I mean, when they announced, in the 90s that we had found life on Mars, when we found that meteor and all that, the public barely even reacted. So Hard to say. Hard to say. And Shishwan and Sebastian from To the Future have paid us a visit. Thank you so much. Sorry it took me so long to get to your comment. Thank you so much for paying us a visit. And guys, if you are not subscribed to the Future, please subscribe. Please subscribe. So, yeah, definitely. These folks talk about the Fermi paradox a lot as well, baffled by all these elaborate explanations of the Fermi paradox, one more spectacular than the other. But it seems to us that humanity doesn't like the most obvious one, that our instruments and our detection methodology is just not advanced enough to detect them unambiguously. But of course, we don't like that explanation for obvious reasons. Yeah, it could be. It could very well be that our technology is not yet advanced enough to detect something with a technology that has, that's like a million years in advance of us. Dr. Loeb talks about, would a civilization that is a million years ahead of us, or 2 million years ahead of us, or a billion years ahead of us, would they even look upon us as an intelligent species? Or would they look upon us as some curious bunch of chimpanzees or dolphins that show, some signs of intelligence, but really haven't made the leap to true intelligence, the level of intelligence that we can scarcely dream of, that might be a very common thing throughout the galaxy? We don't know, because we haven't observed anything like that. Hard to say, but always interesting to talk about. Okay, given time, we will have gathered enough data on extra solar system items to know how unusual Oumuamua was. I suspect very unusual, certainly passing so close to Earth raised an eyebrow, says Ali D. Yeah, there's a lot of things about that thing. And I've been through the list. You can go back to my video to see it. There are so many things about Oumuamua that were unique, unusual, and unnatural. And for all of those things to be present in the same object, the first object that we detect coming through our solar system from outside, is so unbelievably unlikely. The comet that we just detected in 2019, that makes sense. But, in 2017, we detect something that unique. Hard to say. Triggers Bernie, statistical inevitability that some of those civilizations will be hostile. Yep. Could be. I would say that odds are that once at least one of them is, and might actually, doesn't it take a little bit of hostility? Doesn't it take a little bit of aggressiveness to want to go out and explore the universe in the first place? Don't you need to have that kind of killer instinct in order to survive long enough, in order to be able to go out and check out everything that's out there? And so what happens if we encounter something that's more aggressive than us? Maybe they destroy themselves. Maybe civilizations like that destroy themselves. But if they don't, that could be a dangerous thing. And once again, what always comes to mind for me is Przybylski's star, the star that contains an insane amount of radioactives, many of these elements decay so quickly that they shouldn't be in this star in that kind of quantity unless somebody is putting them there. Now, there have been some theories coming out about how neutron stars, extremely powerful neutron stars or magnetars, could create this sort of thing, but there's nothing in the proximity of Przybylski's star that would explain this for us to have observed these facts. So, why would a species put all of these radioactives into their sun? Because they want to get rid of them? Because they want to get rid of anything that's could potentially start a nuclear conflict in their society? Or are they trying to advertise to the galaxy that, hey, we've got a lot of radioactives, a lot of nukes, so don't mess with us. Don't even think about it. And if that's the case, what do they have to be afraid of? Who are they trying to ward off? So maybe there is something hostile out there. Once again, not very conclusive evidence, but still, it's I'd say you can at least theorize about it. Okay, as long as Mimi says, as long as we're transmitting radio waves, we're already advertising our existence. True, there would be a delay due to the distance and the speed of light. One thing is that casual radio waves, like for example the Olympics in Germany in the 30s, the most famous one that they talk about in Contact and such. These sorts of radio waves would fade over time and distance to where they would be virtually undetected detectable at a distance beyond maybe 50 to 100 light years. So you get to, I think it's even closer than that. So you get to a certain point and the evidence of your civilization kind of fades away. It needs to be really powerful, really narrow band radio signals like the one we picked up from the Proxima, the whole Proxima thing that kind of fits. That's the kind of signal that needs to be sent out in order to be detected over great distances. Okay, Clapstar says this isn't very scientific, but if we live in a simulation, yeah, that's always a good one. We may be the only habitable planet in this particular simulation. A simulation wouldn't need to simulate a universe full of life, just the appearance of a universe. The reason Collapsar, I tend to think that we're not in a simulation, from a philosophical standpoint, it's impossible to prove that we're not. But one of the reasons I think is that if a simulation has been created for us, why create such an enormous universe, including areas of the universe that we can't even observe? Why make something that big, that impossible to explore? Maybe to make it more convincing, I don't know, but it seems to me you could make a universe a couple million light years across and it would be still more than large enough to be convincing in a simulation. But then again, who knows? I've never created a simulation and put a whole civilization of people inside it. So hard to say. Navy Wing Commander observed ETI with his Mark I eyeball. Yeah, that is a thing. A lot of folks have certainly observed it. A lot of credible people have seen something. There's no question in my mind that not all these people are lying. Not all these people are nuts. At the same time, though, we don't have any observable recorded evidence that we can examine in detail. That is my problem with the whole UFO thing, is even though I acknowledge that maybe it could be true, we just don't have, anything that we can quantify and put in a laboratory. Oumuamua, we can study all of the data that we got on it and then come to conclusions based on that. But with UFOs, we're getting mostly just testimonials. And yes, an eyewitness account is enough to get somebody executed in a number of states, but it isn't enough to prove the existence of UFOs, ironically enough. So the Victorians wouldn't be able to detect and interpret a mobile phone message, says Ken Walton. Very true. They wouldn't even know what a mobile phone was. You take somebody out of the 1960s and they wouldn't know what a mobile phone was. They might be able to guess, I suppose, but they have no idea. And certainly not what social media was or anything like that. It would seem alien as hell to them. Johnny Spacer, good to see you again. The reason why we the only hominid left is our aggressive and competitive nature. That it's true. There was a time in our history when there was more than one hominid species on the planet. There was us and the Neanderthals. Two intelligent species, the Neanderthals being actually larger and more physically powerful than us, and yet at the same time, they were the ones who didn't survive. Or did they? Because Neanderthals, for the long run, actually lasted longer as a species than we currently have. Does the fact that they weren't advanced enough to develop a sophisticated technology actually allow them to survive as a species longer than we're going to survive? That's also an interesting philosophical question. I, for one, hope that we live longer than the Neanderthals, but we've got a long ways to go before our species makes it as long as they did. A long way to go. Okay, truly advanced civilization, says Starliner Glitch, would be using quantum entanglement to communicate over vast distances without any kinds of signals. Yeah, that could very well be true. In which case it would be almost impossible for us to pick it up. There's a lot of things. So really all we can hope for is to detect civilizations that are kind of like us. Axiom Space, once again, thank you very much, guys. My friends at Axiom now, and I think I can call them my friends at this point, given how helpful and how welcoming they have been. Wow, way beyond what I expected. So anyway, shout out to them, definitely. And I can't wait to see their space station go up. Okay, back on topic. Johnny Spacer says our radio waves would be faded by interstellar gases. Yep, that is true. The three body problem. Interesting. I'll have to check that out. Sci-fi from China, apparently. Okay, Jare says a decent simulation could contain the whole universe known by us, so it doesn't matter. That's true. It would be capable of it. I guess the question I have is why make it so big? Why make it so impossibly big when you could make it, a tenth of the size that it is, and it still would be very convincing? I don't know. But that's a question I answered. By the way, while I'm doing shout outs, a shout out to Spaceship Mania as well. They've got SpaceX keychains, they've got Crew Dragons, they've got starships. Make sure to use the code ANGRY10 if you pay them a visit, and they are linked in the description. They put out some really good SpaceX stuff. So another shout out there. We've got some new patrons at Starliner Glitch. Thank you so much for coming on. Really do appreciate it. Thank you for joining and supporting this channel and being part of the conversation. Mimi says some theories suggest, yes, that's true, that we interbred with the Neanderthals, which is why they no longer exist as a separate species. That could be definitely part of it. There are traces of their genetics within, our genetics. So yeah, they do live on. It's actually, I think, more than a theory. I think it's actually been proved from a genetic standpoint that there are traces of Neanderthals within some human beings. And of course, my kids love to say that I've got the most Neanderthal genes of anybody. We'll see. But anyway, okay, Darth says, once we do get the irrefutable proof, how many prior discoveries do you expect to be found in existing data that wasn't recognized at the time? I think tons. I think there's a number of things that we have seen already that defy natural explanation, that can easily be explained by artificial causes that we have simply ignored by not looking through the telescope, as Dr. Loeb says. The Catholic Church refusing to look through Galileo's telescope. I'd say that we're probably going to see a lot of that. So yeah, Johnny's right. We some of us do have Neanderthal genes. He brings that up. Going ballistic. Hello, welcome back. To answer the ultimate question, that is why. Yes, and it is the ultimate question, isn't it? How precious is life? How common is it? How unique is it? And what is all of that going to mean? I mean, a lot of people who argue that, we are alone or, very close to unique in the universe or the galaxy, they've got a powerful philosophy behind that. Because we are so unusual, that's what makes intelligent life so valuable, so precious, and so unique. And that's why it needs to be protected. That's why we need to treat our fellow, man with greater consideration. Why, war, murder, that sort of thing, really, that sort of thing needs to be abandoned by our species eventually. Because life is that precious, is that unique. We take ourselves out and something truly, truly special has been removed from the universe that we will never get back, that may never be seen again, So yeah, but if we find that intelligent life is very common, then does, wiping out a civilization become a commonplace thing? Is it something that happens on a regular basis, that kind of like in Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, where you get, the Earth demolished to make a hyperspace bypass by the Vogons? Is that instead what things become, and how common, and unimportant intelligent civilizations are? That's a tough question. 42, yes, indeed. The question about why you create a simulation also applies to the universe created by a god. Yeah, and that's of course another open question, and one reason why a lot of people do like clinging to the idea, and I'm not saying it's illegitimate, clinging to the idea that we are alone in the universe, at least in terms of an intelligent species, because God God created, us, and it's, Christ, sacrificed himself, for the good of mankind. Why would God give his only begotten son for, one of a billion species out there? What that doesn't, make as much sense as opposed to we are unique in the universe, etc. And so therefore, that's what makes us important, because we're not the center of the universe anymore. The universe doesn't revolve around the earth anymore. So we've got to find something else that makes us special, something else that makes us unique, that sort of thing. So I don't want to get onto the whole, whole religious discussion, obviously. I've got my own religious beliefs, and so does everybody else. And that's the nice thing about most countries, is they let you believe whatever you want and don't cut your heads off for it. And I count myself to be very fortunate. I think anybody watching this right now that lives in a country where you can worship and believe as you wish and not get your head cut off for it or executed or whatever, count yourself very fortunate, because there are lots of people, as was revealed recently in Mozambique, with the massacre that occurred there recently, for religious reasons. An awful, brutal thing that occurred there. There are a lot of places where that isn't the case, and I count myself to be a very lucky human being, and my children lucky too. To freedom, says Johnny. And yeah, I agree. Freedom, and not just in the United States, obviously. Canada, Europe, wherever freedom exists, that too is a precious thing, a very precious thing. And I hope that other civilizations throughout the galaxy believe as we do, and believe that everybody's opinion matters, that everybody should be able to believe as they wish. Okay, that's enough political, gibberish. Okay, so in Thy Image, yes, for the first Star Trek movie. Irrefutable proof. What do you think such proof could be? It's tricky. Some already known proofs and discoveries on the topic. That's true, Jerry. In my opinion, I think the proof has already been found. But other scientists obviously don't agree. The majority of scientists do not agree. But I believe that enough evidence has been discovered to suggest very strongly that there's other life. Certainly more evidence that we have that there are multiple universes, that there are multiple dimensions. We don't have any observational data that proves that. All we have is mathematics and quantum physics, which can be pretty tough to figure out. I'm not saying that those disciplines are, wrong. I'm just saying that, if you put these on the same scale in terms of observational data, quantum physics and multiple universes and extraterrestrial civilizations, you're kind of on the same scale there. And yet we create things like the CERN super collider at the cost of billions of dollars to study, the fine details of particle physics. And how much money have we put into the effort of finding other civilizations by comparison? Nothing. I mean, virtually nothing compared to how much we spent on the CERN super collider. So yeah, it's a tough one. Breaking news during the stream: Elon tweeted an expected SN11 flight tomorrow afternoon. Highway closures are in place from 1200 to 1700 window, probably towards the end. So good. I'm very excited about that. So yeah, probably a launch of SN11 in the afternoon, and I will be timing the release of my video, my new video tomorrow, which is going to be entitled "The Most Important Moon Mission of 2021," and it's pretty detailed. One of the reasons why I didn't want to spend all day today working on it, take too much time away from my son. But I'll be releasing that immediately after the launch. However, if you're part of the Discord group, you'll get to see it early. As soon as I'm done, I'll release it on a private server for the folks who are supporters. Once again, just because you took that leap of faith to support this channel, thank you very much for that. And for everybody else, please like, please subscribe. Just the fact that you're watching makes a huge difference to me, and I do appreciate it. Elon might be considered intelligent by other intelligent species. The rest of us probably not so much. The Starliner glitch. I can certainly name a lot of people on this planet that wouldn't be considered intelligent by most species, but at the same time, I'd be being pretty insulting at that point. So I'm just going to go ahead and keep my piece on that one. All right. So we still have some time left. I was going to devote about an hour or so to this discussion away from my son. So I definitely will thank him. He's very supportive of what I do. My son has been really wonderful in terms of supporting my new career, even though it requires me to work on weekends and work weird hours as I'm trying to get videos finished, get content created, researching, that sort of thing. I try to do my research in as great of detail as I possibly can because I want to be right about this stuff. Obviously, I'm going to be wrong sometimes, and I've got a good team of people, by the way, amongst my Patreon supporters, my Discord supporters, who check a lot of my work, people who are far better scientists than I, who check on my work to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. Yeah, I want to take him to a Starship launch. School is a tough time for those sorts of things. School attendance means a lot, even during the COVID period. School attendance is paramount here in South Carolina. He's trying to get a scholarship the way his sister did. So, that being the case, that's pretty important. Thank you. I appreciate that, Jerry, what you just said. Thank you very much. I do appreciate it. So we still have some more contributions to make. So we've talked a lot about, why there could be intelligent life, why we could have already observed it, or why we might not have observed it. We've also talked about reasons why we might be alone in the galaxy, why there might have been life or intelligent civilizations at one point, but they may have taken themselves out in one way or another, or been subjected to some sort of cataclysm, because there's a lot of different ways that could happen. And obviously it could happen to us too. One of the main reasons why Elon is trying to take us to another planet. So we become a multiplanetary civilization. It's much more difficult to extinguish us. What are we doing in the search for other civilizations that we should be doing? Is astronomy enough to find them? Well, SETI is hardly supported. It's privately supported. There's no government aid for SETI. It's just not getting the funding it needs. We don't observe the whole sky for narrow beam radio transmissions on a regular basis at all. We really don't keep things thoroughly covered and keep things under observation all the time. We don't have the instruments in order to be able to do that. In order to pick up a signal, we kind of have to be looking for it from the right direction at the right time in order to, receive that signal. If you've only got so many instruments dedicated to that, sometimes you're going to miss things. I'd say a lot of times you're going to miss things. Putting a big radio telescope on the far side of the moon would be a really good thing to do. I mean, there's so many astronomical benefits to doing that, but in addition, it would eliminate all of the radio chatter that could be silencing these signals that we could be receiving from other civilizations, maybe not directed towards us, but just unintentional. We could be getting bombarded all the time and have no idea that it's coming in. Nikola Tesla believed that in the early days of radio, he got all kinds of signals that he thought were coming from other civilizations. He thought it was coming from Mars, as a matter of fact. And of course, we know that there's nothing intelligent there, but that's what he thought. Who knows what Mr. Tesla was hearing at that time? But these were the early days of radio, and there are lots of things that produce radio signals. Jupiter produces a tremendous radio signal, and kind of a haunting signal, actually, if you ever listen to it. Look it up sometime and pull up Jupiter's radio signal. The noise that it makes is very, very strange and could very easily be misinterpreted as an intelligent intelligence signal. Okay, so let's see here. I'm falling behind here. Maybe interstellar travel is not possible, so other intelligent species exist, but like us, they can't leave their home star system. Yeah, that is very much a possibility. Once again, I keep going back to Dr. Loeb, and he looks at fast radio bursts, and he made some calculations in terms of how a number of fast radio bursts are being handled on a frequency that would be very favorable towards light sails that are being propelled by radio waves rather than by light, and it fits. It fits in terms of the ideal technology. And given the strength of these radio bursts, if they were directed, he calculated that it could be transporting as much as 1 million tons worth of mass at 99% of the speed of light. Technologically, it's possible. From an engineering standpoint, it would be an incredible undertaking to do something like that. But theoretically, it is possible. And given that we've seen these fast radio bursts all over the place in the throughout the universe, maybe this is the common way that civilizations travel between stars. Maybe this is how you do it. And so this is why we've seen it over and over again. Once again, these are all just, theories, but they're interesting theories to talk about. Could flat earthers be stuck in an old version of the simulation? Starlighter glitch, that's a funny one. Okay, Neil Yu, gamma ray burst hitting the Earth would be a very bad day. Could the same ray hit Mars too? It would be a bad day. However, gamma ray bursts do tend to be on a narrow band, so they probably wouldn't hit both planets. So we could, unless we happen to be unfortunate enough to be lined up at the time, it's unlikely that a gamma ray burst would zap Earth and Mars simultaneously. Now, if it was the radiation given off by a massive supernova, that's a different story. But once again, there are no red giants close enough, even Betelgeuse, for example, that are big enough and dangerous enough to create something like that. So hard to say. Oh, by the way, SETI.org. Yes, everybody go there because there are ways that you can participate in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. And I think that, everybody who enjoys astronomy, who enjoys space flight, should also be a part of this, because you can't dismiss the possibility of, at least, of the existence of other civilizations. There was it's at the project, the remaining process capability could be offered to analyze collected radio samples for the SETI project. Now PCs are more powerful, internet more widespread. Why are there no such projects now? Interesting. That'd be an interesting thing for SETI. I know that there are certain things that can be done with your own PC in conjunction with SETI. Just not so sure exactly what. Okay, Darth Russ says it was too successful. They got more processed than they could analyze. Have 20 years worth of backlog, says Darth. Thank you for that information. Looking for other ways to crowdsource computing. But why do they have 20 years worth of backlog? Because there aren't enough people looking at it. It is easier to get a tenured position as an astronomer and an astrophysicist if you're studying multiple universes in multiple dimensions than it is to get a tenured position looking for extraterrestrial civilizations. Way easier. So if you are a young budding astrophysicist or astronomer coming out of college, what kind of job are you going to take? You're going to take the job that's going to give you a tenured position and financial security for the long run. So you're not going to go off chasing these crazy alien people. You're going to be sticking to the things that get grants, get money, get foundations and governments to support you. And that's one of the big problems we have with SETI right now. One of the many problems that we have is the fact that nobody is really interested in funding it. And so therefore, very few scientists are interested in going after it. Dr. Loeb is one of the very few, and once again, a highly respected man, the chair of the astronomy department at Harvard for 10 years. That's one of the most prominent positions in astronomy that you could have. And, he was already tenured, so he could afford to take that risk. With others, not so much. Space travel like in Altered Carbon. I love that series. That's a great series, Amy. Leaving your consciousness in a clone body after transmitting it across space. Once again, theoretically, it could be done. Once again, I think Elon's kind of working on things like that, ways to make us immortal. Of course, Altered Carbon also has a pretty grim view of what would happen to a civilization once they became immortal. What would they start? How would they start to behave? It's in Altered Carbon. It's pretty awful. Use AI applications to evaluate the results. Yeah, that could be a narrow type of hyper intelligent AI. That would be a good thing. Or create a PhD in extraterrestrial intelligence, says Johnny. Yeah, actually, Dr. Loeb talks about that in his book too. Once again, I can't say this enough. I highly recommend it. Read Extraterrestrial. Actually, there's lots of books that Dr. Loeb has written, but read Extraterrestrial. He does advocate the creation of that kind of thing and says that we could, if we had just looked at Oumuamua as what it could have been, it could have started off an entirely different type of profession, an extraterrestrial archaeologist, people who are engaged in the study of looking for elements, looking for artifacts, looking for things created by intelligent civilizations. But once again, we don't have it. Because the scientific community, the vast majority, refuse to look through the telescope. And I know I keep repeating myself. I'm a broken record here, but until people start taking this stuff seriously, I'm just going to keep saying it. Because once again, I don't have a tenured career to risk, so I'll say these kinds of things as much as I want. Unfortunately, the people who are really in the discipline and have the knowledge and the education to do more about it, they're not going to say these things as freely. Antimatter-fueled rocket engines moving at relativistic speeds would make interstellar travel reasonable. Yes, indeed. Ex-Fermi lab, Dr. Gerald Jackson's working on making grams per year. Maybe I will. Yeah, I'll take a stab at trying to interview Dr. Jackson. The possibility of making antimatter, in larger quantities could definitely change everything. And yes, astrobiology is indeed a profession, says Johnny Spacer, and he's right. Astrobiology is something that we are a lot more willing, the scientific community is a lot more willing to accept, because the evidence is piling up more and more and more that we are eventually going to find something. I predict that the very first astronauts to set foot on the surface of Mars, take some regolith and look at it through a microscope, are going to see something very quickly. Given the results we got from the Viking landers, I think we're going to find something there very swiftly. So I tend to think that that is the case. Thank you for the reminder, Mimi. Yes, I've been keeping an eye on that. Make it in space, not here, for an antimatter engine. Yeah, that's a good idea. Very much so. Antimatter, not something you want to mess around with. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hate to cut everybody off here, but once again, I take my responsibilities as a father very seriously, so I need to go ahead and cut this off. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. This will be recorded. I do apologize that I'm going to be putting ads onto it, but I am trying to raise as much funds as I can to go back to CSN 15. So until we have this incontrovertible, indisputable evidence of extraterrestrial intelligence, or we have indisputable evidence that it does not exist, until this question, this overwhelming question that so many of us have been debating for so long, are we alone? Until we answer that question once and for all, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.